Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. La 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 la. La 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 la. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Do 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 do. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Ba 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 ba. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Do 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 do. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. La 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 la. Okay, I guess it works. I'm now going to formally tweet out the link, and I don't know how exactly to proceed with the discussion aspect of this. Guess people will theoretically write in the YouTube chat window there, or they could tweet me, or whatever. So, let's see what happens. Hello, welcome. I don't know who you people are. I don't know what you want, but I guess I lack sufficient energy to do anything more constructive right now. So, why not chat? Window open in conjunction with the YouTube window, and there seems to be some lag between the two. I'm not sure if that'll affect anything. Hopefully not. I guess we'll wait a couple minutes to see if other people join in. I don't know why they would, frankly. I wouldn't. Sound is a bit distorted. The lag is normal. Okay. How's the sound now? Yeah, this is live. I think Hangouts is just a I don't know who they is, but I think Hangouts is just a mechanism to feed live streaming into YouTube. Um, I've used it at various points to appear on different shows and podcasts and whatnot. Um, I know people use it to kind of internally do conversations for various things. So, somebody just sound is okay, if you don't mind. Yeah, Hangouts is, I would think, for largely corporate or like kind of business related stuff. Maybe some academics use it, I would guess. Probably not. The majority of users are tweeting out links to chat sessions, so it's probably a niche use for it. Um, the polling, you know, one of my, I mean, I'm assuming you mean presidential election polling. One of my quips, um, one of my critiques of the political press is the incessant focus on polling. Now, you can obsess or specialize in polling to a constructive degree, in that, um, you know, there's utility in gathering polling data and analyzing it and contextualizing it. But because so much of the political media business model is driven purely by tallying up the latest polling results, it really gives a distorted picture of, you know, what the actual state of affairs is in you know, election. Actually, this is the, and that was you know, the basic criticism leveled by Nate Silver in 2008 when he first started um, his blog. At the time, it was a blog, 538. People forget, but he was an anonymous commenter on Daily Kos in Poblano originally, and and uh, one of the reasons that he felt compelled to even enter the fray of polling analysis was because the mainstream approach to, you know, conveying polling data was so poor. Uh, um, so, you know, what I think, and you know, so 538, there's useful data to be gained from following it closely, but sorry, I got distracted momentarily. So I mean, I would take, you know, take any individual poll with a grain of salt is the basic principle. There is utility in looking at the polls in aggregate and kind of trying to discern different patterns and trends based on that. But what I don't like is when individual political reporters will just kind of furiously tweet out or, you know, trumpet the latest individual polling results, because on balance, I don't think it's useful information. I mean, it's kind of like emotionally gratifying information in that it feeds this never-ending hunger to get some kind of numerical representation of where the race is at any given point. But you know, for the most part, I don't think it is constructive. You know, that said, I mean, I'm not a polling firm, so I can only go based on what the polling firms overall are telling us, and what they're telling us overall is that Trump is probably behind. I think a I think a potential facet of that to keep an eye on is that Trump, after the Republican convention, had consolidated Republican voters behind him, and that was reflected in polling data. And actually, for maybe 5 days, a week, or something, he was ahead. And I think, and that was a function, in large part, of his consolidating Republicans. So now he's kind of atrophied some of that Republican support, which I think is resulting in him being at a polling deficit. But what I would keep an eye on is, as the election nears, I personally think it's likely, and the historical patterns would bear out that it's likely, that there will be, there will be consolidation around both major party nominees. So support for the third parties, Johnson and Stein, will probably drop some, and support for Trump and Hillary will probably, solidify. So if Trump is behind now by something like 4 or 5 points, I would say that a full consolidation of the Republican vote behind him is probably worth like 2 or 3 points, and then you would have to get some other factor, I guess, to kick in to create the conditions where he could actually win. So I don't. My general position on the likely outcome thing is to tack on an extra 20% or so to what the in Trump's favor, to whatever the data is telling us now. So if he has a 20% chance to win according to the consensus, I would tack on another 20 to that, which means he would be at roughly 40%, which is not favored, but very much in the running. And there's so many variables at play, and it's such a unconventional trajectory in the polling thus far, at least compared to the most recent cycles, that I think it's likely that there could be some kind of drastic shift at some juncture. So in 2012, Romney never came anywhere close to the polling peak that Trump saw in late July. So to me, that suggests a level of volatility in the race that we hadn't seen in previous cycles. So 2012 didn't have that. It was a relatively static race all the way through, even though some people conjectured that Romney was closing the gap after that first debate, but I never thought that was likely at all. And then in 2008, there's probably a tad more volatility, and then if the financial crisis was a volatile variable, obviously. But even then, it was reasonably clear that Obama was going to, in all likelihood, win. So I would say that Hillary's still the weak favorite at this point, but I wouldn't quite bet on it. As for polling, the polling firms are not intentionally skewing the results. This should be obvious. Go back and look at what some of the more devoted adherents to that theory were saying in 2012, and you'll see how silly they ended up looking. That's a conspiracy theory. There's no way that polling firms are coordinating amongst themselves to somehow damage Trump, and fixating on that stuff doesn't, like, say theoretically you wanted to help Trump win. Fixating on whether a certain poll is being manipulated is not going to do anything to help Trump win. So just in general, this doesn't pertain specifically to Trump supporters, but just channel your energies on something a little more constructive. I don't think so. No, I don't think polling agencies are not manipulating. I mean, polling agencies are a lot of times affiliated with universities, So, I mean, they could lose their. Let's say that one of them theoretically was manipulating their polling data, right? So, like Monmouth, um, which has actually had one of the best track records so far this cycle, or Quinnipiac. Those are both universities, and if they were maliciously manipulating results, they could incur all kinds of sanctions that would jeopardize their academic standing. So that's not happening. That's silly. Who is my favorite currently serving senator? Um, I would say probably Elizabeth Warren. Although, my criticism of her is that she doesn't focus on foreign policy. But if you're a senator, you can develop an area of focus. And I think the area of focus she has developed is on the centralization of corporatism, corporatized power. And I think to have somebody really challenging that power structure in a cogent and well articulated fashion is useful. I would have considered supporting her in 2016, and an ironic part of the whole Bernie bro narrative that developed is that a lot of those same so-called Bernie bros were begging Elizabeth Warren to run against Hillary, and she opted not to. And she was one of the very few Democrats in the Senate to not endorse Hillary until the primary was over. So that was, I think, valiant on her part in a sense. I like Rand Paul to an extent, just because he's a stalwart civil libertarian, and he's been at the forefront of questioning various misguided foreign policy endeavors. His presidential run in 2016, which people don't even remember now because it was such a flop, didn't impress me all that much. I always thought Ron Paul, his father, was a little more coherent on these issues, but even so, I think Rand Paul has done some laudable things, namely the anti-drone filibuster in, what was that, 2014? Yeah, and maybe it was 2013, and Patriot Act stuff. I think those are two. Warren and Rand Paul are two polls in the Senate that are worth having in there because they are impediments to the kind of ordinary power structure within their respective parties, and they kind of shake up the dynamics there to a salutary degree. Even Senator Chris Murphy, whose no fly, no buy filibuster was a total farce. He actually has some decent insight on foreign policy stuff. So he's one of the very few politicians of any caliber to talk about the Saudi bombardment of Yemen. And on national TV, he did that on Jake Tapper's show, I think, last week. So, having a U.S. senator go on national airwaves and level a pretty stinging criticism of that Saudi bombardment, which has been going on since March of 2015, so for a long time now, and I think that made a tangible difference. So I would applaud him for doing that. Let's see. What will the Green and Libertarian Party do to swing state in polling? I think like I said, their polling right now is probably a little inflated. So the third-party candidates' polling as of now is a little inflated because the unfavorability of both Hillary and Trump is so high that it's inevitably pushing people into whatever other options are available when they're responding to pollsters. So I think both Johnson and Stein's ultimate vote result will tick up a little bit compared to 2012. Actually, now that I think about it, 2016 is a little unusual because both the Green and Libertarian nominees were the same. This time are the same nominees as of last time. So they built up a constituency over 4 years, which is kind of maybe baked in for them, and they can build on that. I don't know offhand for sure, but I don't think that has ever happened before with those two parties. I have to double check. Um, so I think, so while I think their vote results will tick up a tad, um, I think the polling picture now is maybe a little misleading as to what their actual level of support in the electorate is. Um, but another reason why I would probably give Trump a little higher odds than he conventionally is getting now is because the polling data suggests that Johnson actually takes more away from Hillary than Trump, which is counterintuitive if you haven't been following what his base of support is. And then obviously Stein will take a lot more away from Hillary than Trump. So um, I think those candidacies actually portend bode somewhat well for Trump. That's not to say that I think Trump is a favorite. I just think those are factors militating in his favor. Let's see. How do we make America great again? Gee, that's a big question. Depends on what you mean by great. Depends on what you mean by America, I guess. You can make America great again by channeling as much love as possible into the universe. How about that? That's my my Buddhist oriented answer. You can actually, it's funny because the strain of Buddhism that is popular in America anyway, so I'm sort of like an Americanized Indian-derived form of Buddhism would say that literally what you can do to most, quote, make America great again is renew oneself and develop a capacity for empathy in oneself. And that will have a broader kind of crossover effect on others. I don't know. I wouldn't say that I personally endorse that approach. I think there are some more like assertive ways to make things great, but that's how a fair amount of the Buddhist devotees would answer. And actually one of the reasons so I do meditate, and I have been on meditation retreats, and I've sort of been I have studied Buddhist thought, Theravada, for the most part, and I guess that instinct in me is why I said I would stop actively fighting with trolls so much on Twitter and just try to disarm them with kindness. So that's my Buddhism inflected Twitter ethos that I tried to self-impose, because when you having this posture of constant sarcasm can be a little exhausting. Granted, it can be fun, but for the most part, I think the best way to actually convince people is to be kind when possible. Am I comfortable with having such a large alt-right fan base and being retweeted by people like Ricky Vaughn? I didn't specifically cultivate a large alt-right fan base. Prior to maybe the last 3 months or so, I guess my my following was largely left. Although even prior to that, I've always had some sort of a toe in the libertarian/conservative world. So I've been a contributor to the American Conservative for 5 years now. Um, I know you didn't say I did. I'm just kind of noting it for the record. I think it's interesting. I mean, uh, I'm not one to tell people if they can't appreciate what I'm putting out into a public forum. So I'm not going to take any steps to try to dissuade them from sharing my quote-unquote content or anything like that. Uh, I don't endorse their tactics for the most part, obviously, and I don't agree with their philosophy for the most part. But there's an anti-establishmentarianism about them that I think overlaps in a very tangential sense with mine. Um, so I'm okay with it to that degree. I'd rather, if a bunch of neocons, loved me. Would that somehow be better? I don't know. I don't think so. Let's talk a little bit about the Clinton emails Foundation post-election. Well, it's funny, the Clinton Foundation should be a major a campaign issue right now. So this rush to talk about what it might entail post-election, I think, is just kind of a mindless regurgitation of the Clinton campaign talking points because they want to, kind of instill it in your head that her election is an inevitability and that she'll just sort out, this vast mess of ethical issues after she's, gone through the annoying process of actually, winning the electoral vote. So I think it's worth just focusing on it now and what implications it has for her presidential campaign before getting ahead of ourselves and trying to speculate as to what it might bode for her actual presidency. Although I will indulge in a little speculation just to say that she could be the most ethically compromised new entrant into the presidency, maybe of all time. Just because there's been literally no other candidate who has such a vast web of ethical conflicts, or revolving around her, him or her. The Clinton Foundation is just so entangled in so many different entities, and there's been so few independent audits or assessments of its practices that I don't think we've even really begun to understand the full scope of what ethical issues it really would entail for her presidency. And then Bill has such a vast network of his own, and of course there's overlap. So it's really unprecedented, and I think you'd see Republican congressional investigations kick off almost immediately. And unlike with the Obama congressional investigations, they would actually have some merit. So for the Republicans tried, so this so-called vast right-wing conspiracy, which comprises in part the Republican congressional delegation, they tried their mightiest to take down Obama on something or other. I don't know if you remember the Fast and Furious scandal or the IRS Lois Lerner scandal. Maybe there were kernels of validity to some of that, but none of it ever reached Obama directly to any meaningful extent. And a lot of the conspiracy theorizing from the populist right about Obama was just totally deranged. Whereas with Hillary, there's a lot more validity to it, notwithstanding the Hillary's health conspiracies, which is just stupid. But in terms of her ethical improprieties, all that is perfectly legitimate. So there will be some legitimate basis for this inevitable storm of congressional inquiries when she were to be elected. So I just think it'll be a real mess right away. It'll probably stifle her attempts to really push through any kind of legislative agenda. Um, let's see. You are getting a following with the right because you are willing to engage with good faith and seem to be fair-minded. Well, I mean, I guess that I appreciate that. Um, I think a lot of liberals would, basically agree. They just don't care for my emphasis right now, which is to try to scrutinize rigorously the Clintons, because I feel like there is a dearth of that now in the media ecosystem. So I'm perfectly on board with legitimate inquiries into Trump and legitimate analysis and criticism of Trump, and I've done some of that. But I feel like there's a void to be filled, and I'm focusing a little bit, a little more heavily on Hillary. So of course, the more partisan liberals are going to dislike that. But there are some, more, um, intellectually honest liberals who don't, in theory, object to scrutinizing her. They just kind of bristle viscerally at people who engage in that now, especially because there's so much "quote unquote" at stake, and it's the most important election of all time, and all that kind of stuff that we hear every 4 years. I mean, people were saying that 4 years ago when the guy running against Obama was Mitt Romney, the moderate Republican governor of Massachusetts. So that kind of rhetoric will kick in no matter what during election season. Let's see. Do you think neocons are using Clinton and to Trump to rehabilitate their tarnished moral legacy, or are they sincere? I mean, I think they sincerely want to rehabilitate their legacy, because that will allow them to insinuate power, and power seeking is their reason for existence. Because the only way to implement their agenda is to take the reins of the state. I mean, you can't if you don't control the state, the mechanisms of state, you can't enforce your global hegemonic vision, because you need to have control over the American military to do that. Have I seen Felix Biederman since he got suspended from Twitter? No, I have not. I also wish he's okay. Or hope he's okay. I'm sure he's fine. He was banned once before, when his name was Swarthy Velen. I guess for similar offenses. I don't remember exactly what was the cause for the banning back then. But yeah, he was. I mean, he has such a unique way about him, and his mind operates in such a different kind of planet, uh, in a way that is kind of amazing. So I wish. I mean, I hope that they let him back. At one point, I tried to make earlier today. I made this actually at the time when Milo got banned. I'm not. I'm not in league with Milo in any way, and I don't endorse much of what he stands for or his tactics. But at the same time, when you have liberals begging our glorious tech overlords to enforce their moral standards on the masses, um, inevitably that is going to lead to the creation of arbitrary standards, which can then be enforced on others with whom you might have more affinity. And I think a perfect example of that is now Felix. So, when Twitter caters its terms of service or whatever to the whims of its quote unquote power users, um, that's inherently arbitrary, because the whims of power users are not universalizable into broader, equitable standards of conduct. Um, so of course you're going to have situations like this where people are kind of randomly banned without explanation for engaging in conduct that you see all the time on Twitter, but in this particular instance, happen to irritate somebody who has a blue check mark and who is, if not directly connected to the managerial brass of Twitter, at least has some kind of inroad with them, by whatever kind of avenue. You can use the term, you can use the phrase "glorious tech overlords" if you want. I'll hand over the copyright, or I'll relinquish any claim to the copyright of the trademark. Chop of the Trap House is tight. I agree. I am a listener. I followed all those guys prior to them actually launching the podcast, and it's funny how they kind of coalesced into this kind of trifecta, just based on a mutual Twitter sensibility. I don't know like the full genesis of how they actually came to meet, but I'm guessing that was the driving impetus for it. You're so smart, MT. Honestly, the most level-headed dude on Twitter I follow. Good job. Thank you. I'm glad people feel that way. Try to just kind of call them how I see them, and give no truck to the powerful. That's sort of a cliched way to put it, but there's just so much BS out there constantly that I feel like a sense of moral imperative to dissect it where I can. Even my own Twitter intake I've had to modulate a bit because it's gone so off the rails in so many different directions that if you don't regulate it, at least in my case, you go utterly insane. Especially with the Russia stuff. I mean, that's just the lack of outrage, the lack of even attention to the extreme rhetoric. To me, it's just out of this world crazy. I mean, the campaign manager accused Trump of being a puppet of the Kremlin. Now that is like the most prototypical espionage thriller movie concept ever. I mean, have these people not seen the movie The Manchurian Candidate? That was like my favorite movie as a kid. So in hope, political reporters would at least have some familiarity with it and note the parallels when they're in their face like that. And it doesn't help that it doesn't help that the guy's name is Mook. I mean, the campaign manager for Hillary, Mook. Chapo Trackhouse taking down Kevin Williamson was a watershed moment for me. That was a good moment. That was, I think they articulated a lot of what I had been. They articulated sort of a critique that had been floating in the ether as to that Kevin Williamson piece on the moral shamefulness of, immiserated white voters in Appalachia or in post-industrial enclaves. And yeah, they really did crystallize it well on whatever episode that was. La la la. This is my first appearance with live chat. Cool. My first experience too. I think I've clicked randomly on them before. I don't even remember what to exactly to see how they work. But I never participated fully in them. So right now we have 19, 20 people. I think the peak was something like 28. And even with that, I mean, it's not a huge amount, obviously, but even so, you can still get pretty decent conversation going. So that's sort of useful information to know. So I appreciate you guys being here at whatever 10:43 Eastern Standard Time on a Friday night. What reporters do I admire most? Well, I mean, there are sort of different categories of reporters. There are a lot of reporters at places like the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, who do just good, straight, and Associated Press, as we learned this week, or as was reinforced this week. So a lot of reporters at outlets like that who do, crucial, investigative, just empirical information gathering type work. So Matt Apuzzo at the New York Times covers the Justice Department, and he wrote a watershed book in 2013 on the NYPD's mini surveillance state. Actually, not a mini surveillance state; it's a bona fide surveillance state that they created after 9/11, and it hadn't really been adequately scrutinized for over a decade after its creation. And he kind of blew the lid off that. He and Adam Goldman, who was previously at the Washington Post, and I believe now I saw is now transferring to the New York Times. So they're reporting partners, and they do really key reporting. So I follow them. Matt Apuzzo, Apuzzo, and Adam Goldman. They wrote a book together in 2013. So look that up. And they won the Pulitzer Prize for the Associated. Because they were both at the Associated Press prior to that, and they won a Pulitzer Prize for the NYPD reporting. So they come to mind. Let's see. So then aside from reporters of that category, people who are avowedly ideological who are reporters. So ideological is not the right word, but they're unabashedly opinionated, and they use their reporting to inform their opinion making. I guess that's sort of more along the lines what I try to do. If I had the resources, I would do a little bit more reporting on a regular basis, and I try to do as much as I can. So I feel like it's important to not just be spouting off without any kind of empirical basis for your claims. You really want to have as much firsthand experiential basis for your analysis as possible. So yeah, you guys probably know Glenn Greenwald, who I've always admired. He's kind of been he's been somebody to hard to put into words. So he's just kind of defined this model of enterprising journalism / commentary that I think is extremely influential. It has been on me, just like a lot of people. Let's see. Now, at least the Silicon Valley elite are pushing an anti-Semitic line on Stephen Bannon, Trump's Sandman Trump. I didn't see that. I don't know. Send a link to whoever in Silicon Valley is trying to push the line on Trump's on Bannon being anti-Semitic. Or are they just saying that Breitbart in general is anti-Semitic because they've embraced to whatever degree the alt-right? I guess there might be some truth to that. I'm a Trump voter, but like Jill Stein better than Jeb Bush, Mitt Romney, William F. Buckley. How can we build on that to take on the Quintites, neocons, and national reviewers? Jeez, that's a big question. One of my reportorial and analytical interests long before this current campaign has been trying to elucidate potential points of convergence between the left and the populist left and the populist right. So you saw that actually in 2000, you saw that take shape in 2011 to an interesting extent with Occupy, which kind of existed in tandem with the Tea Party. And actually, one of the things that I documented, or I focused on documenting at Occupy, was the presence of conservatives and libertarians there. So there was always a Ron Paul contingent at the Occupy sites, and and kind of fleshing out whatever affinity existed there. I thought was a useful endeavor because it shedded light on that convergence between, populist coalitions which might not ostensibly have much in common in a traditional left-right Democrat-Republican sense, but could find really kind of fruitful common ground. So I think exploring those angles for kind of populist cooperation against centralized power is useful. So by centralized power, I mean corporate welfare, a military-industrial complex, media conglomerates, and so on and so forth. I mean, so I think, those are the areas where there can be a convergence. My thoughts on the alt-right speech that Hillary gave. I was staggered by it. I don't know if you followed my Twitter commentary. One of my first, remarks was just that I was just legitimately shocked that she did it. I was on the radio in Sirius in New York with Matt Welch, who's was formerly the editor-in-chief of Reason magazine, and I guess is now contributing editor or editor emeritus or whatever. But he had me on to speculate as to what she would say, and during that interview I said that I doubted that she would actually refer to the alt-right by name. So when she did it, I just found it jaw-dropping. Just from a purely kind of dispassionate standpoint, I just found it just a legitimately shocking thing to have happened. The substance, I thought, maybe about 60% of it was reasonably accurate, just in terms of her pure analytical insight. There are some emergent trends on the right to be aware of and to look at with keen attention, I would say. But then I think she undermined her point not fully, but almost fully, when she tried to tie it all together under the rubric of Putin, which she did at the end of the speech, and to use the phrase "grand godfather," quote unquote, I mean, of global extremism. So it's like I have a piece actually coming out about it on Monday, hopefully. But it's it would be darkly comical if it didn't have such serious implications. I mean, the level of rhetoric toward Russia now is the single most important storyline in the election and in American politics writ large. I mean, the idea that we're having this brinkmanship with Russia again, 25 years after the Cold War ended, it's just beyond stupid. And it's beyond cynical. And it's being ginned up for purely politically opportunistic reasons. And that's one of the I've been focused on it because it's not just happening in the abstract. It's happening. There's a proxy war happening right now in Syria. And to some degree in Ukraine, but Syria is the more powder keg situation, where you have Russian aircraft and American aircraft in similar airspace. So there's a very decent likelihood that there could be some direct confrontation in the near future. And actually, that's one variable which might impact the ultimate election outcome in November. What if there is some conflagration in Syria in mid-September? We don't know what the political effect would be domestically. So it's just crazy, and the fact that so few journalists are willing to kind of look skeptically on those claims about supposed Russian subversion of the U.S. electoral process, to me, is just mind-blowing. I keep getting comments on Twitter that I'm one of the very few people who seem to be pointing this out. And to me, it's just so glaringly obvious that I can't comprehend why I should be one of the few people to be pointing it out. Let's see. I don't think neocons are putting her up to it. I think the more worrisome thing is that she puts herself up to it. It's her genuine belief to be antagonistic to Russia. I mean, meaning she genuinely believes that being antagonistic to Russia is in her political self-interest at this juncture. She doesn't need to have neocons whispering in her ear to do that. Although she has them in her broader orbit, and that itself is a big problem. And I've written about it, and I tried to call attention to it. But I think Hillary is not being manipulated, surreptitiously by neocon agitators to get her to be take on this hostile posture toward Russia. She's doing it on her own accord, which is even more dangerous, probably. Yeah, I should probably go back and read some of the contemporaneous reporting on the Reagan-Thatcher efforts to undermine anti-nuclear movements in the U.S. And I guess also in Britain. It's been a while since I kind of read up on that history. Given what's happening now, I bet that would be useful. So that's a good idea. I'll do that at some point. Does Bill give press conferences? No, he does not. He barely talks to press at all. That's another thing that I wrote something about, should be coming out soon, which is, why is Bill? Bill's giving a free pass for totally avoiding any semblance of press scrutiny. He's not a traditional spouse, a presidential spouse, and even so, traditional spouses do make themselves accessible to media at a far greater extent that he has done this cycle. Even Melania Trump, who's not going to be a major political figure in the Trump White House, prospectively, has granted more media access than Bill. And certainly Michelle Obama did. Laura Bush, I think did. I have to go back and check that, but I believe she probably did. And even Hillary herself, gave pretty frequent press interviews in 1992 when she was running alongside Bill. But they've, sequestered Bill away this cycle because he has the capacity to say scandalizing things, obviously, on a relatively frequent rate. And then, of course, that's cheered for the most part by liberal partisans. And even the more neutral commentators were saying, "Oh, isn't it wonderful that they've finally been able to muzzle Bill?" As if, keeping him away from media is somehow virtuous. It's a whole kind of great warped mindset that sets in among the commentariat that has no relationship to actual rigor or utilitarian kind of outlook on trying to actually increase the amount of goodness in the world. It's just this weird kind of intra-pundit philosophy that envelops them, where they somehow think shielding Bill is savvy. How can she take the escalation in Syria so lightly that she would declare Pepe a Kremlin agent? Well, I don't think she addressed Pepe. Somebody did yell Pepe. That was just a beyond parodic moment of the alt-right speech is when some dude in the audience yelled Pepe, like at the literal moment that she first, you know, mentioned the alt-right. I mean, that was just like, you couldn't have written a script better than that. No Doug Bannon interview when Clinton camp talk about pushing Clinton Foundation transparency. Yeah. So the Clinton Foundation was so one of the talking points recently, if you go and look at what Brian Fallon has said, who is their sort of lead Twitter PR man, and Mook has said this as well. They've used the word unprecedented to describe the level of transparency that the Clinton Foundation has gone above and beyond to impose on itself. Well, first of all, just not true. And second of all, okay, let's say that they are genuinely committed to transparency. Then why not make the former administrator of the Clinton Foundation, Doug Bannon? I forget his actual title. It was not CEO, but something like that. So why don't they make him available to the media to clarify the role that he played with respect to any kind of intermediary position between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department in 2009 to 2013. And that would, if they did have some genuine commitment to transparency, that would be a no-brainer, right? But I don't see him on CNN or speaking to the New York Times or going to NPR to like really give a full accounting of what his role was. They've kept him hidden. That's not transparency. What's your opinion of Jeet here? He's always hating. Hating on whom? Me? No. I like him. I've I know him somewhat. We speak somewhat. He speaks now and then. He prior to his being at the New Republic, he was one of the foremost critics. So it's pretty extraordinary when, after the New Republic sort of imploded in December 2014, that he was one of the first new hires to sort of remake the New Republic. That itself was a kind of incredible media development, and a lot of the elites at the time were incensed that the old guard of the New Republic had been pushed out of the door, and he was replacing them. So I'll always have some affinity with him, just in the sense of him upending, or being part of the process of upending that old guard of the New Republic. Actually, after that, I began contributing to the New Republic, and I've done so as recently as a couple months ago. I should be doing so again soon. So yeah, I think Jeet has he has good insight. He has a very, very comprehensive sense of American political traditions, and the history of American political thought and evolution thereof. So I think he's a useful part of the quote-unquote conversation. I don't agree with everything he says, and I don't agree with everything that he. I don't agree with his emphasis always. Why should I have to agree with everything everybody says? That would be boring. Yeah, TNR was pro-war, but that was a different TNR regime. It's a new regime now. I mean, that was why it was so massive that basically in the entire publication imploded in 2014. So it's not clear to me at all that they would support an Iraq war-like endeavor now, although you never know. You have to be on guard for it. I would doubt that, though. My thoughts on the passing of John McLaughlin. Well, I was legitimately sad when he died. Just because it's funny. I haven't seen the show much at all for years, and then just this past year, maybe I ended up coming across their YouTube channel and would, you know, I would watch it every week or so, maybe since, I don't know, February or March. So just by happenstance, I had been watching it somewhat regularly just recently. And as a kid, some of my first exposure to the national political debate was through that show. So I was the type of kid who would watch it every weekend. Um, so yeah, but no, he had a long life. It was seemed to be a fruitful and gainful life. So you can't be all that standardized. But even so, I was sad. Um, la, 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 la. That you think trolling is effective. Which journalists, political operatives should we be targeting? Would be targeting? Whew, that's a loaded question. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Um, there's a way to constructively object to what people are saying that doesn't have to come across as trolling, per se. I don't like the term targeting. I mean, I think if you have something legitimate to say to someone, then say it. Don't be unnecessarily inflammatory. I mean, one of the let's say you have a legitimate point to try to get across. If you're just constantly incendiary, then it loses salience. Um, whereas if you're a little more mild mannered, when you do make an incendiary point, it has increased potency. Um, I would urge a little forbearance in that respect. Um, I don't know. I'm not, I don't want to. I don't. Wouldn't recommend. I don't know. I mean, you have to clarify what you're trying to achieve by trolling in order for me to answer who you should be quote unquote hard targeting. Um, is Breitbart a white nationalist site? That's a good question. I think it's pretty clear that they are catering to white nationalist elements. Whether that means they're explicitly is a little trickier of a question. I think they find there to be a financial benefit in being the sort of clearinghouse for that sort of quote unquote content. But I sort of reject the premise that the current incarnation of Breitbart is like dramatically different from earlier incarnations. I think it's always been similar in its orientation, and the difference now is that because it's become so closely connected to Trump, it's making Republicans who had previously, heralded it queasy. So they're sort of, opportunistically distancing themselves from it. I don't think they should be allowed to do so because it's because of them that it even became a formidable force in the media in the first place. Have you not noticed the emergence of online hate mobs from both sides of the aisle? Online hate mobs? I don't know. I don't. I mean, of course, there's a mob. There's always going to be a mob mentality to some degree on social media, but just because the forum or the medium is conducive to mob-like behavior. Um, uh, But I'm skeptical of this notion of targeted harassment that's gaining popularity lately. People have to be, or made to, like, people like Jeremy Corbyn are made to answer for so-called targeted harassment. For the most part, people who are like eager to get involved in quote-unquote harassment online are not are not sort of savvy enough. Maybe savvy is the wrong word, but they're not sort of I don't know, with it enough to like coordinate anything substantial amongst themselves. That's not a accurate reading of the nature of what they're doing, I don't think. So, the targeted harassment charge is used as a bludgeon to go after people you want to go after anyway in a lot of cases. So it's very cynically misappropriated. So that has manifested in the Bernie Bro stuff and Corbyn now and other similar efforts. And I don't buy into the premise that targeted harassment as such exists. It's undeniable that people face unsavory pushback quite often on Twitter and other social media. I mean, but to impute this level of organizational prowess to it, I don't think it's quite right. What does white nationalism even mean? Oh God, I don't know. I don't want to go down that road. It's sort of a catch-all. I mean, I think. So if you look at the etymology of the phrase, white nationalist is people for whom their political solidarity is limited. Their sense of political solidarity is limited to race. And they want to establish a nation of some kind with those whites. So, there's been, it's funny, I actually attended, journalistically, a white nationalist conference 3 years ago now, before there was any notion of an alt-right. And it ended up being, fortuitous because a lot of mainstream to an amazing degree in a short amount of time. This was actually in Washington, D.C. In 2013, and this guy Richard Spencer had organized it, who's now been anointed as one of the leaders of the alt-right, broadly speaking. And one of the sentiments there at the time was that we need to go to Montana or something and start up our own little mini nation states that are limited to whites. So yeah, I think it's a rough picture of white nationalism. Obviously, there's a longer conversation to be had about what it actually means. What are my favorite books? Jeez. Well, actually, this is a book I just finished recently, which I really would recommend. On just the history of the. It's a really God, how do I put it? It's a meticulous examination of the Vietnam War that came out 2 years ago, called "Kill Anything That Moves" by Nick Turse. I don't know if this is my favorite book. It just happens to be the one I read most recently, and I would recommend it. But it really is a jarring and disturbing, and look at what the actual tactics employed during the Vietnam War of the U.S. were. And it's not hyperbolic. It doesn't rely on kind of rhetorical excess to get researched and reported, and shows just the really depraved lengths to which the U.S. went to obliterate the Vietnamese population. And this didn't happen that long ago. So, I mean, I wouldn't on the order of the Vietnam War happening again in the future. Although it's a little harder to conceive of now because a lot of the crimes would be a lot more closely documented just because of the technological changes. So, in any event, yeah, I mean, that would be one of my current favorite book. I would have to think a little more deeply about what my overall favorite book is. Yeah, I haven't read Field of Fire by Jim Webb, but I read his memoir, Born Fighting, which was very good, well written. I was receptive to the notion of Jim Webb running in the Democratic primaries. Obviously, this past cycle, he dropped out quickly, and it probably was never going to work for him to really gain any kind of traction, just because of the shifting nature of the Democratic coalition. Yeah, but I thought he really brought a lot to the table, and he could have, especially on the foreign policy front, and also the criminal justice front, which he was a pioneer in. He really could have added something genuinely substantive to that mix, but unfortunately, it wasn't the right time for him. Actually, he would be someone I would like to interview soon, possibly. Let's say Ray called Palas books. No, I haven't read any of his books. I followed some of his articles over the years. He actually did a lot of great stuff. I remember on Mitt Romney in 2012. His Romney's ties to Bain Capital, and he just really elucidated that history well. I don't know why that sticks out to me, but it does. But no, I haven't read any of his books. What do you think about the Bernie Krause and the Dem Party? I don't think Webb. No, Webb didn't endorse Trump. He might have said something that not praiseworthy of Trump, but acknowledging of the legitimacy of the grievances that he's brought to the fore. But I don't think he endorsed them. Maybe I missed it, but as far as I know, Webb did not endorse Trump. Yeah, as for Bernie Kratz, so-called entering Congress, yeah, I don't see that happening really, because I mean, in order for that to happen, there would have to be a wave of primary victories by insurgent Democrats against establishment Democrats, and we don't really have any evidence of that happening yet. I mean, it's possible that Wasserman Schultz will lose, and that could be one kind of symbolic representation of Bernie Kratz kind of gaining momentum, but even that will be an isolated case, and not enough to make any real inroads, I don't think, in the congressional party. And that has to do with Bernie himself not having been a bona fide Democrat. I mean, Hillary people use that as a criticism, but most people thought that was a virtue of his, rightly, I think, and that he operated outside the Democratic structure and was able to gain a following on that basis. But that kind of precludes, to some extent, getting too intricately involved with sort of mechanisms of party power. So there's sort of an impasse there, I think. No. Should I be worried that I'm on a block list used by a bunch of Hillary shills? I wouldn't worry about that. The funniest thing about the whole block list thing with that little coterie of Hillary defenders or shills or whatever you want to call them is that yeah, that's those are cicadas. I think I'm sitting outside right now. No, I wouldn't be too annoyed about being on those block lists. Take it as a mark of honor. I guess the audio on the device is a little more perceptive than I would have thought if you could hear the cicadas. I don't know if they're cicadas. I mean, I guess there's some cicadas, but then there are other just sort of creatures of the night making noises. So it's a chorus of night noise making. And I actually did notice they're actually louder than usual right now for some reason. Maybe it's an omen. Maybe it means there's a demonic force swirling around right now. That would be fun. Yeah, I would like to know. I don't know. How would you search and find out what exactly those things are? Like, how would you describe it in a search term for Google or whatever? I'm sure there must be a way to find out. It's just so weird because you never know quite where they're coming from or what they are. It's like something we take for granted. Just like this barrage of noise. Right? Are they really tree frogs? I don't know. Maybe I should have paid more attention in biology or whatever. I don't know. I think there was a slight shift toward Clinton scrutiny this week. I mean, it's been horrible for the whole summer, but just with the foundation stuff sort of coming to a head this week, the balance did tip ever so slightly toward a more equitable equilibrium. So there wasn't as much of an opportunity for the Hillary partisans to focus relentlessly on Trump. And, I think there's going to be just a constant deluge of Hillary stuff that's going to come out. There could be, hacked foundation materials coming out. Assange kind of has hinted at having more emails that are going to be coming out. There are the State Department still has materials that they've been ordered to turn over in the Judicial Watch lawsuit and another lawsuit. So all that is going to be trickling out on a regular basis. So there's going to be ample opportunity to shift the conversation toward scrutinization of Hillary. Obviously, there's going to be resistance to that in quarters of the media, but I don't know if it's going to be if they're going to be able to resist it. And if Trump is strategic about keeping the focus on Hillary, which I think he actually has been somewhat since Bannon took over, which is a little surprising. And I think I think her favorability is chipped away at. Who knows? Disappointed that I am that Hillary doesn't have a semi-decent candidate to challenge her that would force her to articulate her views. Well, I mean, the thing is that with Trump, he's not the most articulate candidate. But if you had a Romney type running against her, she wouldn't be challenged on the most egregious parts of the record. That was a big problem with Romney running against Obama in 2012. He was perfectly articulate, but all of his criticisms of Obama were stupid. I mean, they were articulately conveyed, apt, or they weren't the most effective criticisms. So on a foreign policy level, Romney criticized Obama for not being antagonistic enough to Russia, for not, exercising sufficient leadership, quote unquote, for going on an apology tour. And Trump has echoed some of those kind of cliche sentiments, but his, overriding foreign policy critique is against, against kind of regime change and nation building and outdated multilateral treaty commitments and so on and so forth. So I think, in that sense, it's more useful to have Trump as the opposing candidate. And then Trump, even today, he put out a really incredible little Instagram ad showing that Hillary calling, young black men super predators, which of course was an issue during the primary, but he kind of that's not an issue that someone like Romney would have brought up, I don't think. So there are downsides to having Trump, and there are upsides in terms of the criticism leveled against Hillary. No, I was not born in 1980. Romney choked like a dog, it's true. That's funny. And he kept the dog on the top of his car, and he sang "Who Let the Dogs Out" at one point. I think that was all in honor of National Dog Day, which is today. Okay, friends, I think I'm going to wrap up now. Hope you enjoyed this somewhat, and maybe I'll do it again at some point. Hopefully, I don't know how exactly to do it technically, but try to have others on the whatever this is, the stream at some point. Yeah, we'll do it again. If you enjoyed it, tweet it and so forth. And yeah, have a good night, everybody. Bye bye.